I am Ines Alea from ToleratedCinematics.com, and today another exciting tutorial. We're going to see how to animate any kind of effect in Adobe After Effects using your audio. So we're going to take a look on our bass, and then using the values of our bass, we're going to automatically change the values of our effect. Let's take a look on what I'm talking about, and let's get started. Alright, so it's not the ideal footage that I'm using here, but you get the idea. I'm zooming into my footage, adding some blur, all using the audio values here. So that's pretty cool. Let's have a look on how we've done that. So I'm going to import my footage right here and drag this into a new composition. As you can see right here, I'm using our channel intro because I thought it could be a cool way to actually use that one for this particular tutorial, because I'm actually talking here to a camera, and a rapper would also be talking to a camera, and this would be like this same kind of shot. It's not actually a music video, but I'm currently not working on a music video project, so that's why I took this one here. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to just cover up my borders here because I actually want to animate my scale, and if we're going to scale this up, of course, we're going to see that on these borders, so that's not what we want. I will just create quickly a new solid layer, black. Okay, you don't have to follow along, it's just to cover up my own footage here, and then I'm going to drag this in here. Something like this, and I'm just going to subtract that. And now if we're going to scale this up, we're not going to get the other borders affect my view here. So I have everything set up. I will just pick this point here. Okay, now I'm going to import my music. I'm going to be using a beat from Lavido. Lavido has his own YouTube channel, which is pretty great. He allows you to use his beats for free in your YouTube projects or non-commercial projects. And yeah, just definitely check out his channel. It's pretty cool. And Lavido, Mr. No Jokes is a song that I will be using here. So I'm going to drag this into my composition, and I will uncheck the audio for my original video here. So I just have this setup. Okay, so now if you double tap L, you're going to see the audio waveform for his beat here. So right here we can see the peaks for the bass, and I'm going to drag this over. So we just have a calm moment before it drops, and then we have some bass, 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 and so on. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And now what I want to do is change the actual waveform into values. So this is going to be a lower value than this value, and then we're going to use these values to manipulate any kind of effect that we want to apply to our video. So what I will do first is just fine-tune my audio a little bit, because currently I have my song, but I want to exaggerate a little bit in the bass, so that if I convert the values to keyframes, it's going to be a little bit more intense and a little bit more, well, it's going to be easier to see. So I'm going to apply the bass and treble effect to my audio, and this is just temporarily, so it's not going to affect your final audio product. So I'm going to input for bass something like 75, and then just lower the treble to all the way to minus 100. And now of course your audio is going to sound different, but that's not what we're doing this for. We're going to right click now, and then we're going to keyframe assistance, convert audio to keyframes. Once you have done that, you can immediately go to your audio and just delete that effect, or just uncheck it, whatever floats your boat. But now we're going to see if we click on that null that it just created. So it created a new null audio amplitude, and this is going to create keyframes for the amplitude of our song here. So we can see here the left channel, right channel, and both channels. I'm going to delete left and right because we just need both here. And I'm going to press U on the keyboard to see all these keyframes right here. If we're going to click on the slider and just go into the graph editor, you're going to see these values here. So if you drag over this, you're going to see right here the amount of the audio. So everything that's what is normal is around, well, it's below 30. And then once we have a beat, it's going to around 60. Okay, there we go. It stays in 60 here. 70, and then all minus 30. And again, here is something like 80, and then it's going to a little bit heavier over here. So what I want to do now is just clean this a little bit up because it's very chaotic. So we have all these different values, and of course, if I will link my scale to these values, it's going to constantly be moving my scale. So just to give you a little bit of an idea, I'm going to press S on the keyboard here for my original video footage. I'm going to alt click on stopwatch, and I'm going to just parent this with this slider. And just see what it does. So now we're going to take the scale, and the scale is going to be the exact same amount as the slider, and of course it's going to be smaller when it's small. So currently it's now a 20 scale, and it's going to be constantly moving. That's not what we want. So now if you want to actually, well, I'm going to drag this up first. So basically what we want is the original scale plus the value of our slider. So what I will do here is, before we have our temp, because this is just our variable, so we don't need that, I'm going to hit return here. This is the actual effect that is manipulating our footage. So in front of that, I will just enter value plus, and then temp, temp. Temp is just this variable here, so this means X, and the other temp means Y. So well, yeah, your first value and your second value. I'm going to just mute my audio here so you don't actually hear it. But if we're going to play this back, you're going to see that it's constantly moving, and this is a little bit too much for what I want. So what I will do now is go back to my slider here and change these values. Like everything below 60 is going to be 0, and everything above like 80 or 70 is going to be 100. So we have the minimum and the maximum. So now I want to change the values for our actual keyframes, so I'll alt click here on my slider. And now we have our effect. We can actually delete this, and I'm going to write an expression called linear open parentheses value. So actually it's going to linearly change every value in here. And then I'm going to open, well, comma, and everything that's, for example, under 40, comma, everything that's above 80, comma, 40 becomes 0, comma, and everything that's 80 becomes 20, for example. Close it. If you're not following along, so it's actually overlooking each step. 40 becomes 0 and 80 becomes 20. The reason why 80 becomes 20 is because 80 is a little bit too intense, because currently we're actually looking at the scale, so the value of the scale, meaning 100% plus the actual value here. So 100 plus 80 would be 180, and that would be zooming in a little bit too intense to my preferences. So I think that like 120% of zoom on each beat is going to look a little bit well, it's going to look better, and then everything below 40 is just going to affect 0 on the scale, which means that it's not going to affect anything. So if we're going to preview this, we can immediately see that it's not doing anything if there's no beat drop. So I'm going to just press double L here so we can actually see visually what we're doing here. So we have no bass drop, here we do, and that's zooming in here. So if I preview this, you can see that it's now affecting only when the bass is in the scene here. So now we're affecting the scale. And of course, if you're going to change the values here in the linear, like if you change this to 85, it's going to pick up a little bit less of these values. You can even go like 90 if it actually passes 90, I'm not sure, but just play around with these values until you're satisfied with something. Like now it's going to affect a little bit less. You can also go like 20, I want this to become 10, and just do it like that, but I kind of like 25 maybe. What you can do as well is just duplicate your original footage and then just alt click on the scale here. So we have one footage with just 100 scale, and then one footage that it's actually manipulating by the scale. And if you press T on the keyboard and lower the opacity here, for example, you're going to get this nice distortion effect here that a lot of videos use. And you can also go and toggle the switches and apply some motion blur for the scale here. So if it's scaling up, and also enable motion blur for that layer, and also enable motion blur for the composition. And if we are going to solo this, we're going to see that motion blur gives this kind of effect, which is pretty cool. And then you're going to get this kind of overlay look that is also giving you some nice results. What I've also done in the preview is I added a little bit of blur. So I'm going to add a new adjustment layer. And here we can do any kind of effect. We can go for blur and apply a Gaussian blur, for example. So let's go for Gaussian blur and apply this to our adjustment layer. Just check repeat edge pixels and then alt click on the value for the blur and just pick the slider effect here. And now on the beat again, it's going to blur it well pretty heavily here. So we can actually see that. We can also go in our effect here for our blur, and at the end of our expression we can multiply it or divide it by an amount. So if you think this is a little bit too heavy or you want more blur, if you multiply it by 10, for example, it's going to multiply this value by 10, and it's going to be affecting a lot more to your footage, as you can see right here. So of course we have to drag this below our border, but now you have a lot like blur on the beat. You can also do the same for exposure, for example. If you want it to be flashing a little bit, add an exposure tag, go and alt click on the exposure and apply this to our slider, and let's preview this. Yeah, of course, and this is a little bit too much. So what you want to do is divide it here by 2, for example, or by 4, and now you get something like this. Some flashes, maybe even a little bit too much still. So maybe divide it by 6. Actually, this can be 80, but I'm going to change the 40 to something like 70. So everything below 70 is going to be 0, so it's not going to affect so much now. Okay, this is a lot better. So now we get these nice flashes on the actual high beats here. So playing around with these values is going to turn up with the result that you're after. But yeah, that is basically it. You can fade it, you can add these like black cuts, some flashes of brightness, some blur, some scale, whatever floats your boat. Alright, so you can do a lot of cool things with this. Let your creativity flow, and if you have any kind of result, be sure to leave the link in the comments below. I would love to see what you can come up with using this technique. And yeah, that's it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and also subscribe to the channel for more. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.